Part 1. The Invisible Boy. Marcus Johnson couldn't remember when numbers first began speaking to him. By age 5, they had already become his most faithful companions, whispering secrets, showing patterns where others saw only chaos. In the cramped apartment he shared with his mother and siblings in Southside Chicago, numbers were his escape. The building on 63rd Street was a crumbling testament to urban neglect, but inside their apartment, Deborah Johnson maintained a fortress of dignity. A single mother working 2 jobs, she ran her household with quiet determination. "Marcus, come eat before it gets cold," she called one morning, her voice already weary. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor, lost in a battered mathematics textbook he'd found in a trash bin. At 8 years old, he was already teaching himself algebra, while his classmates struggled with multiplication tables. "Marcus!" His mother's voice carried an edge of impatience now. He reluctantly closed the book and shuffled to the kitchen table. "Sorry, Mama," he mumbled, sliding onto a chair. Deborah's expression softened as she ruffled his hair. "Got your head in them books again? That's good, baby. Just remember to keep your feet on the ground, too." Garrison Elementary was a battleground Marcus navigated with precision. He knew which hallways to avoid and which teachers would intervene when the taunting inevitably started. "Hey, Einstein!" The familiar voice of Darius Williams, a 5th grader built like a middle schooler, boomed across the playground. "What you writing in that notebook?" "Love letters to your girlfriend?" Snickers rippled through the small crowd. Marcus clutched his notebook tighter. Inside were pages of prime number sequences, beautiful patterns that he was certain held deeper secrets. "I asked you a question, Brainiac." Darius snatched the notebook from Marcus's hands. "Please give it back," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. Darius flipped through the pages. "What is this, some kind of code?" He turned to his audience. "Look at this freak. Writing alien messages or something." The laughter stung, but Marcus had grown accustomed to it. What he couldn't bear was watching Darius's careless hands crumpling the pages that contained hours of his work. "It's just numbers," Marcus said, reaching for the notebook. "Please." "Just numbers," Darius mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Please, please, please." "What's going on here?" A sharp, authoritative voice cut through the jeering. The crowd parted as Ms. Gwendolyn Baker, the 4th grade math teacher, approached. She was tall and imposing, with deep brown skin that seemed to radiate warmth despite her stern expression. "Nothing, Miss Baker," Darius said, quickly lowering the notebook. "Just playing." Ms. Baker extended her hand. "I'll take that, thank you." In her classroom, Ms. Baker returned the notebook and watched as Marcus carefully smoothed the crumpled pages. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the notebook. Hesitantly, Marcus handed it over. He had never voluntarily shown his work to anyone. Ms. Baker's eyebrows rose as she flipped through the pages. "Marcus, do you understand what you're doing here?" He shrugged. "It's just patterns, with prime numbers." "Just patterns," she echoed, but her tone wasn't mocking. It was filled with something Marcus couldn't identify, something like wonder. "Do you realize you're working on concepts most students don't encounter until high school? Some of these explorations, they're approaching undergraduate-level number theory." Marcus stared at his sneakers, a second-hand pair already falling apart. "Numbers make sense," he said simply. "They don't lie or trick you. They just are." Ms. Baker studied him for a long moment. "I have some books you might enjoy, and I'd like to speak with your mother if that's all right." For the first time that day, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Deborah Johnson sat rigid in the small chair in Ms. Baker's classroom, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Parent-teacher conferences always filled her with dread. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming," Ms. Baker said. "I know how busy you must be." Marcus is a good boy. He's not causing problems, is he? Quite the opposite, Ms. Baker said, smiling. I asked you here because your son has an extraordinary gift. Deborah's posture relaxed slightly. He's always been smart, reading before he was 4, doing his siblings' homework for fun. I try to encourage him, but... She gestured vaguely, encompassing all the limitations her circumstances imposed. Ms. Baker nodded. What you may not realize is just how exceptional his mathematical abilities are. She slid Marcus's notebook across the desk. This is work that would challenge many college students. Deborah leafed through the pages, recognizing her son's neat handwriting, but understanding little of the content. He gets this from his father, she said softly. Leon was studying engineering before. She trailed off, the wound of her husband's death in a convenience store robbery still raw. Marcus needs specialized education, Ms. Baker continued gently. Resources that Garrison Elementary isn't equipped to provide. But there are options, scholarships, academic programs, math competitions that could open doors for him. What kind of doors? The kind that could eventually lead to universities like MIT or Princeton, to opportunities that could transform his life, and perhaps your family's as well. Deborah closed the notebook, tracing her fingers over her son's name. People have been making promises about doors opening my whole life, Ms. Baker. Those doors usually have a way of slamming shut in faces that look like mine and my son's. I understand your skepticism, Ms. Baker said, but I'm not just making promises. I'm offering to help navigate the process. I've worked with gifted students before, and I've seen what's possible when their talents are nurtured properly. Why? Deborah asked bluntly. Why take a special interest in my son? Ms. Baker's expression grew solemn. Because 20 years ago, I was a young girl with a passion for mathematics and no one to champion me. Because talent like Marcus's comes along rarely, and to see it wasted would be unconscionable. And because the world of mathematics needs more voices like his. Deborah studied the woman, searching for signs of condescension or pity, and finding none. Only genuine conviction. Marcus isn't like other children, she said finally. He feels things deeply, but he doesn't always show it. I don't want him set up for disappointment or made to feel like a curiosity. I promise you, Ms. Baker said, that I will protect his dignity as fiercely as I nurture his talent. Deborah nodded slowly. Then we have a deal, Ms. Baker. As they shook on their agreement, neither woman could have imagined just how far their compact would take the silent boy who spoke the language of numbers. Part 2. The Awakening. Over the next 4 years, Marcus underwent a transformation under Ms. Baker's guidance. He devoured advanced mathematical concepts with insatiable hunger, rapidly progressing from algebra to calculus, from basic number theory to abstract algebra and beyond. By 12, Marcus had won his first national mathematics competition, solving problems that stumped high school seniors. The local newspaper ran a small article about him. Southside Prodigy Defies Odds, complete with a photo of Marcus looking uncomfortable in a too-large suit, standing beside a beaming Ms. Baker and a proud Deborah. The article brought unwelcome attention at school. Celebrity in the house, Darius, now in 8th grade, announced in the cafeteria. But can the genius tie his own shoes? The mockery stung, but less sharply than before. Marcus had found something that Darius could never take from him, a world where his value was measured by the clarity and creativity of his thinking. More importantly, he had found a community through competitions and summer programs. For the first time in his life, Marcus experienced the exhilaration of being truly understood, of not having to translate or simplify his thoughts. You're different when you talk about math, Sophia Alvarez, a fellow participant at a summer mathematics camp, remarked when they were both 14. Like you're speaking your native language instead of one you had to learn. Marcus considered this. That's exactly what it feels like. Like I've been speaking a foreign language my whole life, except when I'm doing math. So what are you saying in this language of yours? She asked, genuinely curious. Marcus was silent for a long moment. That beneath the chaos, there's order, he said finally. That patterns persist even when we can't see them. That truth isn't subjective. It just is. As middle school gave way to high school, Marcus grew physically, finally hitting a growth spurt. But the most significant development was in his mathematical confidence. His notebook scribbles evolved into carefully structured proofs and explorations. "You're outgrowing me," Ms. Baker admitted one afternoon in his sophomore year. "Never," Marcus protested, genuinely alarmed at the suggestion. Ms. Baker smiled. "It's what should happen, Marcus. The student surpasses the teacher. That's how mathematics advances." She slid a folder across the table to him, an application for the Princeton University summer program for high school students, with information about their full scholarship for promising mathematicians from underrepresented backgrounds. "Princeton?" Marcus whispered, running his fingers over the university's emblem. "One of the finest mathematics departments in the world," Ms. Baker said, "and a place where you'll be challenged in ways I can no longer provide." Marcus stared at the application, excitement and anxiety churning in his stomach. Princeton represented a world so far removed from 63rd Street that it might as well have been another planet. "What if I'm not ready?" he asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I get there and discover I'm not special at all, just a kid who was good at math by Southside standards?" Ms. Baker's expression grew stern. "Marcus Johnson, in all my years of teaching, I have never met anyone with your mathematical intuition. You see connections that escape professionals with decades of experience." She tapped the application firmly. "The question isn't whether you're ready for Princeton. It's whether Princeton is ready for you." Princeton University's campus sprawled before Marcus like something from a film. Gothic buildings draped in ivy, carefully manicured lawns, students lounging beneath ancient trees as though they belonged there. Marcus clutched his new backpack, a going-away present from Ms. Baker, and tried to quell the sensation that he was an imposter about to be exposed. "Looking lost?" a voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus turned to find a tall, blond boy with an easy smile and clothes that radiated casual affluence. "A little," Marcus admitted. "I'm trying to find Fine Hall." "Math department," the boy said, nodding. "I'm headed there myself. First day of the summer program, right? I'm Jackson Hayes." "Marcus Johnson," Marcus replied, shaking his offered hand. "Chicago," Jackson said immediately. "I remember from the bios. You're the one who proved that theorem about prime number sequences at 14, right?" Marcus blinked in surprise. "That was just a small result." Jackson laughed. "Only a true mathematician would call a Journal of Number Theory publication a small result." Inside Fine Hall, a distinguished man with steel-gray hair was addressing the group. "Welcome to Princeton," he was saying. "I'm Professor Richard Harmon, director of the summer program. Over the next 8 weeks, you'll be challenged in ways many of you haven't experienced before." He began reading off names and mentor assignments. "Jackson Hayes, Professor Abramowitz, algebraic geometry." Jackson grinned, clearly pleased. "Marcus Johnson," Professor Harmon announced. "Professor Harmon, myself, number theory and its applications." A murmur ran through the group. The director rarely took on mentees personally. After orientation, Harmon approached Marcus directly. "Mr. Johnson, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your paper on prime distribution patterns caught my attention last year." "Thank you, sir," Marcus managed. "I have to admit," Harmon continued, "I was skeptical when I first saw the author's age, but the insight was undeniable." He studied Marcus with keen interest. I'm curious to see what you'll produce in an environment like this, with proper resources and guidance. The phrase, proper resources and guidance, carried an implicit diminishment of Marcus's previous education that didn't escape him. I had excellent guidance, sir, Marcus said quietly but firmly. My teacher, Ms. Baker, has been instrumental in my development. Harmon nodded, though his expression suggested polite skepticism. I expect great things, Mr. Johnson. Don't disappoint me. Over the following weeks, Marcus found the mathematics exhilarating, but the social environment difficult to navigate. Most of his fellow students discussed ski trips to Aspen and summer homes in the Hamptons, with casual assumption that such experiences were universal. Don't let it get to you, advised Amara Okafor, one of only 2 other black students in the program. Half of them couldn't solve a differential equation without Mathematica and a hand-holding session with their private tutors. Marcus smiled weakly. It's not just that. It's like they're playing a game where they know all the rules and I'm still trying to figure out what sport we're playing. Amara nodded. Code switching on steroids. Welcome to elite academia. In his weekly meetings with Professor Harmon, Marcus found his ideas consistently challenged, not just on their mathematical merits, which he welcomed, but on his presentation. His language was too colloquial, his proofs intuitively correct, but lacking rigorous formalism. You need to familiarize yourself with the canon, Harmon advised. Your approaches are unconventional, which can be valuable, but only when built upon a solid foundation of established mathematical tradition. I've read everything I could access, Marcus replied, an edge of defensiveness in his voice. Yes. Well, access is the key word, isn't it? Harmon mused. Perhaps we should adjust our expectations for the summer project. Something more manageable might be appropriate. The suggestion that he should aim lower ignited something in Marcus. That night, he called Ms. Baker. They think I don't belong here, he said without preamble. Then prove them wrong, she replied simply. How? They have years of advantages I don't. And you have perspectives they don't, Ms. Baker countered. Ways of seeing that aren't constrained by tradition. Remember what you told me when you were 9? About why you love numbers? They don't lie, Marcus recalled. They just are. Exactly. So let the numbers speak for you. The truth of mathematics doesn't care about pedigrees or connections. After that conversation, Marcus doubled down on the mathematics itself. He spent hours in the library, not just reading, but synthesizing, drawing connections between disparate fields, testing intuitions against established results. He worked on a problem concerning prime number sequences and their relationship to patterns in quantum field theory. 3 weeks before the program's end, during a routine check-in, Marcus decided to take a risk. Professor Harmon, he said, pushing aside his official project, I'd like to show you something else I've been working on. Harmon's eyebrows rose. Something else? I hope you haven't been diverting attention from your assigned research. I've maintained progress on that front, Marcus assured him. But this is where I believe I can make a more significant contribution. He laid out his notebooks, walking Harmon through his approach to the prime distribution problem, how he'd connected it to recent developments in complex analysis, how he'd identified a pattern that persisted across multiple mathematical domains. At first, Harmon's expression was skeptical, then increasingly focused as he followed Marcus's reasoning. He asked pointed questions, challenged assumptions, proposed counterexamples, all of which Marcus had anticipated. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of intense discussion, Harmon leaned back in his chair, regarding Marcus with new eyes. This is not what I expected, he admitted. It's unorthodox, certainly, but there's something here, something potentially quite important. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then you think the approach has merit? Merit? Yes. Indisputably. Whether it leads to a complete solution remains to be seen, but it's a genuine insight. Harmon tapped the notebooks thoughtfully. I'd like you to present this at the program's concluding symposium in place of your original project. Marcus's heart raced. The symposium would be attended by Princeton faculty and visiting mathematicians from other institutions. Are you sure? He asked. Mathematics isn't about playing it safe, Mr. Johnson, Harmon replied. It's about pursuing truth, wherever it leads, and this is worth pursuing. For the first time since arriving at Princeton, Marcus felt the weight of being an outsider lifting. The numbers were finally speaking for him in a language that even Harmon couldn't dismiss. Part 3. The Breakthrough. 5 years later, Marcus stood at another threshold. Now a doctoral candidate at MIT, he had expanded his Princeton project into a comprehensive theory that was garnering attention in mathematical circles. The journey from Southside Chicago to Cambridge, Massachusetts, had not been without obstacles. His undergraduate years at the University of Chicago had been marked by the same cultural dissonance he'd experienced at Princeton, a persistent sense of being evaluated not just on his mathematical contributions, but on how well he conformed to unspoken social codes. But mathematics remained his anchor, the realm where merit could be objectively measured. His undergraduate thesis had been published in the Annals of Mathematics. He'd received full funding for his doctoral studies at MIT, where he worked under Professor Eleanor Chen, a Fields medalist whose groundbreaking work in number theory had transformed the field. Your approach reminds me of Ramanujan, Professor Chen told him early in their collaboration, referencing the legendary self-taught Indian mathematician. There's a similar leap of intuition, a willingness to see connections that others miss because they're too constrained by conventional approaches. Now, as he prepared to defend his doctoral dissertation, Marcus focused on a specialized case of the Riemann hypothesis with implications for quantum physics, cryptography, and the fundamental understanding of prime number distribution. 3 weeks before his scheduled defense, Marcus hit an impasse, a technical obstacle that threatened to undermine a key component of his argument. He'd been working 16-hour days, his apartment walls covered with equations and diagrams. You need to step away, advised Sophia Alvarez, now his closest friend and a fellow doctoral candidate. Your brain needs reset time. Marcus rubbed his red eyes. I'm so close, Sophia. I can feel it. There's something I'm missing. Some connection that's right in front of me. That night, surrounded by friends, Marcus felt something loosen in his chest as they reminisced about their first mathematics summer camp and debated science fiction franchises with the same intensity they usually reserved for academic disputes. As they walked back to campus, Cameron asked a seemingly innocuous question about quantum entanglement from a film they'd discussed. The idea that two particles can be connected in such a way that the state of one instantly affects the other no matter the distance between them. Something sparked in Marcus's mind, a connection between Cameron's observation and the problem he'd been wrestling with. Say that again, he requested, stopping abruptly. Cameron looked puzzled but repeated himself. Entanglement, Marcus murmured. Connected states across distance. Yes. He suddenly embraced Cameron. That's it. That's the framework I've been missing. Back in his apartment, Marcus worked through the night, reformulating his approach using concepts borrowed from quantum information theory. By dawn, he had restructured his proof, addressing the technical obstacle. The solution was elegant, unexpected, and, most importantly, it worked. Marcus stared at the final equation, a strange calm settling over him. He thought of Ms. Baker, who had first shown him that mathematics could be a journey of exploration. He thought of his mother, who had worked double shifts for years to keep their family afloat. He thought of all the voices that had dismissed him, all the times he'd been made to feel that his background was a liability rather than a source of unique perspective. The numbers don't lie, he whispered to himself. When he defended his dissertation 3 weeks later, the committee, composed of leading mathematicians from MIT, Princeton, and Cambridge, was initially skeptical of his unorthodox approach. But as Marcus walked them through his reasoning, connecting number theory to quantum physics in ways that illuminated both fields, skepticism gave way to excitement. "Dr. Johnson," said Professor Harmon, who had come from Princeton specifically for the defense, "I believe you've not only solved the problem you set out to address, but opened a door to methodology that may have far-reaching implications." The defense, scheduled for 2 hours, stretched to 4. When they finally asked him to step outside while they deliberated, Marcus felt drained but strangely peaceful. The deliberation was brief. "Congratulations, Dr. Johnson," Professor Chen announced when they called him back. "Your dissertation has been accepted with distinction. The committee agrees that this work represents a significant contribution to mathematical knowledge." In the days that followed, word of Marcus's breakthrough spread through the mathematical community. What had begun as a specialized result quickly revealed broader implications. Within weeks, he received invitations to present at conferences across the globe, offers of postdoctoral positions from prestigious institutions, and interest from technology companies whose encryption systems might be enhanced by his insights. 6 months after his breakthrough, Marcus accepted a tenured professorship at the University of Chicago, turning down more prestigious offers from Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford. "I want to be part of building pathways," he explained to Professor Chen. "Chicago is where I can have the most impact, not just through research, but through proximity to communities like the one I came from." 3 years into his professorship, Marcus found himself facing an unexpected dilemma. His work had expanded into applications for quantum computing, with implications for medicine, climate modeling, and artificial intelligence. Technology companies were offering staggering sums for exclusive rights to implement his algorithms. Government agencies were expressing interest in classified applications. The potential impact was exhilarating, but the ethical complexities troubled him. Would his discoveries democratize computational power or concentrate it in the hands of a few? "I don't have clean answers," he admitted to Sophia, who had joined the University of Chicago faculty the previous year. "The mathematics is elegant, the applications powerful, but I'm not sure I trust the systems that will control how they're used." "Maybe that's precisely why you need to stay involved," Sophia suggested. "To help shape those systems, to advocate for responsible implementation." Marcus nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but on my terms, not theirs." Over the following months, he developed a framework for open-source implementation of his algorithms, a structure that would allow broad access while establishing ethical guidelines. He turned down lucrative exclusive contracts in favor of collaborative partnerships with institutions committed to transparent research and equitable access. His stance generated controversy. Some colleagues praised his ethical commitment while others criticized what they saw as naivety. Industry leaders alternately courted and pressured him. Government officials arranged meetings to discuss national priorities and security implications. On the 5th anniversary of his breakthrough, the University of Chicago hosted an international conference on mathematics at the quantum frontier. Marcus delivered the final lecture to an auditorium filled beyond capacity, with Deborah, Ms. Baker, and students from Garrison Elementary in the front row. "Mathematics has been described as the language of the universe," Marcus began. "If that's true, then what we're doing is learning to listen to what the universe is telling us about itself, about its fundamental structure and patterns." He moved through an accessible explanation of his work, using visualizations and metaphors to convey complex concepts. As he neared his conclusion, he paused, looking out at the diverse audience. "People often ask me when I knew I wanted to be a mathematician," he said. "The truth is, I never made that decision consciously. I simply followed what made sense to me, what spoke to me in a language that felt like home, when other languages left me feeling foreign and misunderstood. He glanced at his mother and Ms. Baker, drawing strength from their presence. For too long, the world of mathematics has been portrayed as separate from human experience, as cold, abstract, removed from the messiness of life. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding. Mathematics is deeply human, a product of our collective attempt to make sense of existence. And like any human endeavor, it benefits from diverse perspectives, from different ways of seeing and questioning and connecting. Marcus gestured toward the students from Garrison. These young people and countless others like them across the world possess insights and approaches that we desperately need, views of reality unfiltered by conventional assumptions, questions that might never occur to those of us trained in traditional paths. His voice grew passionate. Our challenge, as mathematicians, as educators, as a society, is to create systems that nurture those insights rather than suppress them, that welcome those questions rather than dismiss them. Because the next breakthrough, the next window into the universe's secrets may come from someone whose voice we've been trained not to hear. Later, after the formal reception ended, Marcus slipped away to find a moment of quiet. He made his way to a small courtyard where he had often come as an undergraduate, seeking refuge when the pressures of academia threatened to overwhelm him. He was surprised to find one of the Garrison elementary students there, a girl of perhaps 11, with close-cropped hair and serious eyes, clutching a notebook covered in equations. "Dr. Johnson," she said, startled, "I was just thinking." Marcus smiled, recognizing something of himself in her demeanor. "Mind if I join you? Sometimes I need to think in quiet places, too." She nodded, making room for him on the bench. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zora," she replied. "Zora Williams." "And what were you thinking about, Zora Williams?" She hesitated, then opened her notebook. "I was trying to understand your proof, not all of it. I know it's too advanced for me. But I thought maybe some parts—" Marcus looked at her equations, crude approximations of his work, but showing remarkable intuition. "You've got good instincts," he said. "You're seeing connections." "But I don't understand everything," she admitted, frustration evident. "And when I ask questions in school, sometimes the teachers just say it's beyond the curriculum, or that I'll learn it when I'm older." Marcus nodded, all too familiar with the experience. "And how does that make you feel?" "Like there's a conversation happening that I can almost hear, but not quite," she said after considering. "Like everyone's speaking a language I'm just starting to learn." "I felt exactly the same way at your age," Marcus told her. "Still do sometimes. But here's what I've learned. That feeling of straining to hear something just beyond your reach, that's not failure. That's the beginning of discovery." He spent the next hour walking her through basic concepts related to his work, marveling at how quickly she grasped ideas that had taken him years to develop. On his 40th birthday, Marcus found himself back in the neighborhood where he had grown up. The building where he had lived with his mother and siblings had been renovated, part of a community development project that had improved conditions without displacing residents. He walked the familiar streets, now with trees planted along sidewalks that had once been cracked and barren, past Garrison Elementary, where a mathematics and science center now bore his name, past the corner store where he had occasionally splurged on candy when his mother gave him a rare dollar bill. His phone vibrated with messages, birthday wishes from colleagues around the world, updates on research projects, reminders about upcoming commitments. But for this afternoon, Marcus had deliberately stepped away from those demands, seeking reconnection with the place that had formed him. He ended his walk at his mother's current home, a modest but comfortable house purchased with his help years earlier, where she now lived surrounded by photographs of her children and grandchildren, evidence of a life that had expanded beyond the constraints of poverty. Inside, he found not just his mother, but a small gathering of people who had shaped his journey. Ms. Baker, now in her 80s but still sharp. Sophia, Cameron, Zora, now a doctoral candidate at Princeton, and several other students he had mentored. "Surprise," his mother said, embracing him. "Did you think we'd let this day pass without celebration?" They shared a meal prepared by Deborah and traded stories that spanned decades of connection. As evening approached, Ms. Baker raised a glass in toast. "To Marcus," she said, her voice frailer than in years past, but still carrying authority. "Who showed us all that when talent meets opportunity, when determination meets support, there are no limits to what can be achieved." Later, as the gathering was winding down, Marcus stepped onto the back porch for a moment alone with the night sky. Ms. Baker joined him, moving carefully with her cane. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, easing herself into a chair beside him. "I was thinking about cycles," Marcus replied, "about how life brings us back to beginnings even as we move forward." She nodded. "The best kind of mathematics. The recursive pattern that builds on itself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge above the city glow. "Do you remember what you told me that first day in my classroom?" Ms. Baker asked suddenly. "When I asked why you loved numbers?" Marcus smiled. "That they don't lie. That they just are." "You were right," she said, "but incomplete. Numbers don't lie, but they do speak, to those who know how to listen. And you, Marcus Johnson, have taught a generation to hear what they're saying." He took her hand, weathered now with age but still strong in its grip. "Only because you taught me first." Inside, the conversation continued. Discussions of research and community projects, of family milestones and daily challenges. Marcus listened to the blend of voices, academic and neighborhood, theoretical and practical, young and old, and felt a profound sense of wholeness. This was his true achievement, he realized. Not the breakthrough that had made him famous, but this bridging of worlds, this creation of space where diverse ways of knowing could coexist and enrich each other. Later that night, after the guests had departed and his mother had gone to bed, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts. He took out a notebook, not so different from the ones he had filled as a child, and began to write reflections on the journey that had brought him here. He wrote about the boy who had found refuge in numbers when words failed him, about the teacher who had recognized possibility where others saw only difference, about the mother who had worked impossible hours to keep that possibility alive, about the colleagues who had challenged and supported him, about the students whose perspectives continually renewed his own. Marcus closed the notebook and looked out at the neighborhood where his journey had begun, feeling a deep contentment. The boy who had once hidden behind numbers had grown into a man who used them to build bridges between worlds, who had transformed his difference from a liability into his greatest strength. In the end, it was as simple and as profound as he had told that reporter years ago after his breakthrough had catapulted him to unexpected fame. "They didn't understand my words, but now the numbers have spoken,